Please enjoy this feature presentation of the Crooked River Radio Network. This program is rated for all audiences.
The World According to Elmer is sponsored by CrookedRiverRadio.com. Crooked River Radio is an internet radio station that is live 24/7 playing top 40 hits from the 60s through the 80s. You can find us on Live 365, Simple Radio, Roku, Radio Garden, and even Alexa, as well as our website. Come on and join us on the Crooked River. Welcome aboard. We're headed for the World According to Elmer, with hosts Gerry Sorenson and Pat Morrow. Don't worry, you'll enjoy it. Wait there. Better buckle in and enjoy the ride. Here come our hosts now.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the World According to Elmer. I am Gerry Sorenson, KG8RRY, and with us tonight is our Elmer, Pat Morrow. He is M8OQP. Pat, good evening.
Yeah, that's right. I'm around here somewhere. Don't tell anybody, though. Yeah, it's a comedy of errors, Jerry. Always a comedy of errors. We are live. Don't worry about that.
Seems very, very loud on this end, Pat.
Well, we cranked it down a little bit here. It should be okay now.
Oh, much better.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Stuff
I hope
happens.
everyone has had a good week, and I hope you've enjoyed it out on the bands. It has been a good week on the bands, and we're getting now towards another change of the time. We'll see what the fall brings, and big changes for 6 meters in the fall. Generally speaking, propagation-wise, on 2 meters, sideband and AM changes, and so we'll be looking forward to that. Usually the noise level gets a little bit quieter when we get to this time of the year, so we'll see all the changes, plus the storms won't be happening like they were earlier, so next few months will be fun.
I hate to tell you this.
It might interest you to know, Pat, that as surprising as this is, I got some QSL cards this week.
No, there's just no way.
Yeah,
No way.
so I thought I would share a couple of them, since I know everybody looks forward to this every week. I heard this week from W4HAY.
Hey!
How's that for a call sign? My wife said to me when this came in the mail, she said, "Is he from Iowa?" I got to thinking, well, he's not from Iowa, but he is from Tennessee. The people in Tennessee are the nicest people. Have you ever been to any place in Tennessee, Pat?
No. I know the Titans.
You don't know what you're missing. The people down there are very nice.
Tennessee
No matter
Titans.
who you are, they're just as nice as can be. And so was this gentleman. Of course, this guy was on CW, like most of my contacts. So of course he's nice, because everybody on CW is nice. It is the gentleman's side of the band, trust me. Guess what came in this week, Pat? And I'm going to go ahead and skip down the stack here so I can get both of them at the same time. This is just going to shock you that this happened. But I was looking in my QSL cards this week, and I got one from Boston, Massachusetts. Go figure.
Another
and I got one here that has the USS Ranger on it. These cards are what, Pat?
Special events cards.
Yeah, 13 colonies.
13 colonies, yeah. That's right.
And so the 13 colonies cards continue to trickle in. I think this is it for the cards. I think the only thing that I still need is the certificate, which goes in the center of all these cards when I do my framing here, as soon as I get that certificate. So give the certificate another week, Pat, and if not, I think I'm going to have to send them a note and say, hey, I'm missing one thing, guys. But I'm looking forward to having that up. And this
from you.
This has just been a great contest. I really love this. I'll do this again next year. 13 Colonies rocks. Here's KF4YP. He is from Kentucky, and his card had a little bit of, looks like it got run over by the postman's car. But actually, I like that. You know, people say, Jerry, you shouldn't mail these things out. You should put them in envelopes and send them. Now, part of the charm of receiving these cards is when they're a little scuffed up. And they've canceled the postage on the back.
It also shows how cheap the amateur radio operators that are sending them are.
Yes, it does, because I have never put a card in an envelope in my life. I just stick those things in the mail. Here's one from over in Jawsey. This is K2NJ. NJ, go figure, New Jersey. People are very creative with their call signs, except for that one ending in HAY. I'm just teasing. That's a good card, too. Here's another one that has some road rash on it. This is WD8, I think, CMD. The number is strategically missing off of the card because of the U.S. Postal Service. For those who are brand new to the hobby, or maybe you're a spouse of someone who is in the hobby, or maybe you just happened upon this program tonight, call signs are a combination of letters and numbers. Now, it used to be that the number was the geographical area of the country that you lived in, and it still is somewhat. For instance, in the Great Lakes area, which we're in, our number is 8. So in Pat's case, Pat's call sign starts with an N, and then he's got to 8. Okay, and my call sign is KG8. And so used to be, now I don't know, Pat, take me back in time here. Did you ever have to change your call sign in the past when you moved from one part of the country to the other, or could you always just take it with you?
You pretty much always just took it with you that I know of. I've had my N8 calls since I got into the hobby.
Okay.
And
so 8s can be anywhere now, but back in the day, it used to tell you when somebody would give you their call sign, it would tell you pretty much where they lived, or at least in the geographical area where they lived. I told you last time that we always have a colorful card, and I told you about this lady a couple months back. You probably won't remember now because it's been a while getting her card. But this is WD4HHN, and she is a very nice lady. She lives in Sun City, Florida. Now, she is 85 years old. She goes by Grandma K on the air, and when she told me her name, and I'm copying it, because I'm doing CW with her. I'm doing Morse code. And I thought I thought I had written it down wrong in the beginning. She's Grandma K? But yes, it's Grandma K. And at 85 years old, she sent this along. It might interest you to know that at 85, she still works full-time. She is a full-time real estate lady, and she tells me that the real estate down in Florida is absolutely booming. So that's what she said on her QSL card.
I would believe that.
Here's one. This is a very colorful card. Another one of our beautiful color cards that come. This is the special events card for W7P, and this is the grandson of the gentleman in 1930 who was at an observatory in Arizona, a small observatory, and he discovered a planet named Pluto. And so thus the call sign W7P for Pluto. And then the /0 denotes his part of the call. But at any rate, every year, they all get together at the observatory. They have a radio there, and they open the station up, and they take calls, and I was blessed to be able to get in on that this year. I was very excited. I love astronomy. I love NASA. I love SpaceX. I love all that kind of stuff, and so that card was right up my alley. And it even came with a nice shiny sticker on the back of it. So, see, all you kids out there that collect those Pokemon cards, you got nothing on me. I have a QSL card with a shiny sticker on the back of it. And those are our QSL cards for the week, so you can wake up, Pat.
Huh? What?
I was at a estate sale here a few months ago for a silent key. Actually, a couple who had both done ham radio together, and they're both passed on now. And I had picked up a real nice analog multimeter, and I found these instructions in it today when I went to put batteries in the multimeter.
Oh,
it's an
sweet.
analog multimeter. It's big. This place is called Olson, and here's what caught my attention, Pat. Look where they're from down here at the bottom. They're from Akron, Ohio.
Yeah, Olson used to make a lot of that equipment. Did you ever know of
an Olson radio in Akron?
The Olsons used to make a lot of their own equipment. I do know that.
Yeah.
I remember that. I remember that place when it was down there by Polsky's and all that. That was a toy store for anybody that was in any kind of electronics hobby.
That went over my head, Pat, but I just keyed in on what you said. Yeah, that was a toy store, right?
Yes, it was a toy store. You ever go to Phil Cap out here in
Yes.
Akron? Okay, take Phil Cap and double it, and you would get close to Olson's. Olson's had a little of everything. If you needed a resistor, capacitor, whatever, that was a place to go. You needed tubes, that was a place to go. You needed a case for something, that was a place to go. And there's really nothing left there now.
I truly miss Radio Shack for that very reason. And I'm not talking about the Radio Shack at the end that was nothing more than a phone store. I'm talking about the place where you could go in and drawer after drawer of capacitors, resistors.
You needed something, you just run to Radio Shack to get it. Yep.
It was a toy store. And that's what we're talking about on today's program, too. So well played. Hey, this is a cool thing that came this week, too. And if you like one of the radios, because we don't get paid by anybody to do this tonight, we've got our sponsors, but no ham radio companies are sponsoring tonight's broadcast. So everything we say tonight, we're not being paid off to say it, okay?
That's
but this is a reason right here to buy an Icom. For Father's Day this year, my wife bought me an IC7100, which is a very nice radio. I have an all-swan tube station, but I always like to keep one modern radio. And the one that I had blew up the day before Father's Day in spectacular fashion. I mean, it went out just like it was the 4th of July.
Who let the smoke out? Woof, woof, woof.
Yeah, who let the smoke out? Exactly right. And it made an arc. This Alinco radio that I had made, which, by the way, there's a hint there. Don't buy anything that starts with an A. But this Alinco radio that I had, it sparked. The spark was so tremendous, it lit the room up. I thought I got an X-ray from this thing as it arced. And my wife was downstairs, and she said from downstairs, she says, "What stinks?" And sure enough, the smoke was gone from the radio. And she came upstairs and she saw my sad face, and she looked at me and she looked at the radio as what was left of the smoke was rolling out the top of it. And she said, "Tomorrow's Father's Day," she said, "is there any place you can go pick a radio up?" So guys, if you're needing a radio and you know what you want, make arrangements to have the one that you have burn up the day before Father's Day, because you might get a free radio out of it. I not only got a radio, but look what came in the mail today. This is a reason right here to go with the Icom, no matter what we recommend tonight. Just make sure you buy an Icom, because look who this check is from. It's not actually a check, but you see these letters? ICOM?
Yeah.
This piece of paper came today from Icom, and it has this on the front of it. And this is a plastic card worth $100.
Oh, sweet.
Buy the Icom. When in doubt, buy the Icom. Well, forget about Father's Day. What's the next big holiday that's coming up? And don't say Thanksgiving.
Halloween.
Thanksgiving's not a good reason to buy a radio, okay?
Halloween.
Halloween might be a good reason to buy a radio.
Stopped you right in your tracks, Jerry.
Christmas is coming, and so Santa Claus wants to bring you a radio this year. So, since Santa's going to bring you a radio this year, what are you going to ask for?
I don't know, maybe a radio.
How much did you pay for your first radio, Pat? Just curiosity's sake.
What I had, my first radio that I ever bought was a Kenwood All-Mode, and I think I gave about $350 for it. Of course, this was back in 1991.
Do you know that Kenwood has a walkie-talkie right now that is over $500?
I believe that.
Yeah.
Well, if you go into anything DMR-wise, or Motorola's D-Star, An HT and D-Star with D-Star is $400. Easy.
It is expensive. All this stuff is expensive. And I think the reason I got started in tube radio is I can remember sitting there, and I remember I got a wish book in the mail. I got the DX Engineering catalog, came to the house one day. If you ever spend a penny with any one of these companies, you will forever get catalogs. Trust me. And this one showed up, and it had all the brand new radios in it. And I'm looking through this. This is right after I got licensed. And I'm looking through there, and it occurred to me, after turning just a couple of pages in the wish book, that there wasn't a good radio to be found for less than $1,000. And I said, I made a vow. My vow was I will never, ever, ever pay $1,000 for a radio. And and I've kept that promise. I have never paid $1,000 for a radio. Now, I think I have about $5,000 of radios.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
You've got to be a little careful there with the verbiage on this, because I have never paid $1,000 for one radio. But wow,
I went 1,100 and 800.
My first radio was a Swan 270B, which is a 150 watt radio, and it was built in about 1970. It started, I think, in 1968. They started putting them together, and this one would have been done by about 72. But at any rate, it's somewhere in there. And I paid $400 for it. So I kept my promise, and I wound up with a great HF rig. But it's a tube-type rig, and it's an older rig. And a lot of people today, especially the younger people, it seems, opt for new radios or newer radios. And I actually have a list tonight to share with everyone of the most popular, the most purchased radios in the United States of America. And I made a little PowerPoint presentation of it. And we've got a video we're going to show here in a few minutes. But I'd like to go through these first if we can, or at least through a couple of them. And maybe we'll finish the list up after we go to the video. But because Pat and I have our own two radios that we want to present, and they are not the ones, I'll say that in advance, the radios that we would buy if this was our first day in the hobby are not the ones apparently that most people are buying, because I know that I had a hard time relating to this list, and we'll see if Pat has a hard time relating to this list or not. There we go. There's Santa Claus calling CQ. CQ, CQ, CQ. Merry Christmas. So let's look at the number one purchased radio in the United States of America, ham radio. There we go. You know what that is?
You gotta be kidding me.
I am not kidding. Before we go any farther, Pat,
that's a Kenwood dual band.
Would you or would you not purchase an HT as your first radio?
It would depend. It would depend on how much.
You're waffling here. Would you or would you not purchase an HT as your first radio?
I didn't. Let's put it that way. I didn't.
Okay, you did not?
No, I actually bought an all band. Like I said, worked pretty well and did what it needed to do.
This particular radio is a Kenwood. And you had mentioned that your first radio was a Kenwood. This one, however, is a handy-talkie or a walkie-talkie. Now, this is not your average handy-talkie. This handy-talkie has GPS built in. It has text messaging functionality. It has Bluetooth, a micro USB, and is micro SD compatible. And it has broad channel reception, so it has things it can receive that it cannot transmit on, and that's kind of true of the Baofeng also, except for on the Baofeng, I think you can transmit on the channels you're not supposed to talk to, but not this one. This one's smart. It'll only let you transmit where you can, and it'll let you receive on the other channels, but you can't say anything.
Well, that's what they make mods for.
Exactly right. Or those instructions on YouTube that tells you to short pin 5 to pin 6.
That's right.
That's what all that is for. Although we don't know anything about that.
No, I didn't learn that. I didn't learn that on the 850, the 855 or the 850 chip from the CB radios, which was probably the the best jumper chip that you could ever want, but I wouldn't have never tried that.
No, of course not. And who would broadcast on CD with 100 watts anyway, right? Far too much wattage. We don't want anything to do with that.
Or who would ever want to go up to channel 107?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, nobody up there.
Or channel 70 or channel 65. But
well, they don't market.
Never.
Kenwood does not market this, by the way, as an HT. They market it as a premium ham transceiver. Now, the nice thing about having the GPS is you can send packet, which is something you've talked about. I don't know how many young people today are involved in packet, but you can do packet with this. You can do D-Star with this handheld. It just pretty much connects up to anything digital, and it's all built in. It has a single sideband in it. It has CW. This handheld operates CW. Can you believe it? And it has AM, and that's unheard of for.
I wonder what the filtering would be like in that.
How did they get it all in that little teeny package?
They have this thing called a compressor.
Yeah, they got something, I'll tell you that.
But looks like a trash compactor.
There's just nothing you cannot do on this radio. I suspect it makes coffee for you in the morning, and it'll probably take the trash out for you if you know the right setting. But it's got everything on it, including broadcast FM. So, if you don't have enough radios to listen to your local radio station on, you can do it with your ham radio. One of the things it has that is nice, and I actually purchased a radio, not this radio, but I purchased a radio just to have it. And that is, it does have the 1.25 meter band in it. And it's kind of hard to find that band. There's not a lot of manufacturers today that are making 220 megahertz an option, because it just isn't used that much anymore. It doesn't justify the extra cost of making the radio. But this thing is something. It's got a 15-hour battery life on it if you're not talking. It has got wide compatibility and narrow compatibility. As far as cons are concerned, they say that it's hard to learn. And I'll bet it is, because you're using just those few little keys on there to do all the stuff we just talked about. And so I'll bet it is a pistol to try to learn how to operate. I would have to sit there with a bunch of index cards and make menus up. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Put those in your shirt pocket, behind your pocket protector that all of us nerds wear, and you would know how to run your radio, because unless you want to carry the manual with you, the one that says Kenwood for Dummies, I don't know how you would remember how you get from point A to point B on something like that. Now, for someone who wants low tech, it is interesting to me that we go from high tech, the number one seller in America, to the lowest of all low tech as the number 2 radio that sells. Does anyone, before we switch the screen here, does anyone want to make a guess who manufactures the number 2 selling radio in the United States?
Bofang.
Well, let's go ahead and see. Oh, there's Santa. His hat is stuck on the beam. Wouldn't you know?
Yeah,
now, if that happens, you may not get a radio under your tree.
I was just going to say, they're one of his Christmas presents.
No, that wasn't his. All right, here we go. Ta-da! There you go.
I've got that radio.
It barely qualifies as a radio, but it's the number 2 seller in the United States, the Baofeng 8-watt ham radio. It has 3 power settings. It supports up to 128 channels. It has a, now these are their words, not mine, because I'll tell you the truth in a second. It has a high gain dual band antenna. Now let me tell you folks that have never owned a Baofeng about their antennas. Their antennas are the weak link of this radio. Their high performance dual band antenna they're talking about is a piece of garbage. And if you use that antenna, no one will hear you on your 8-watt radio, not even the kid across the street. No one will hear you on your radio if you try to use their antenna. You have to get another aerial, which costs more than the radio.
I'm trying to think of the
Truth in advertising here. You're not going anywhere with this radio and the antenna that came with it.
There's a piano wire antenna that I can't think of who makes that. That is made for these both things. It works really pretty well.
Hey, here's an Elmer question for you. All right, so 2 meters is 6 feet long. So how do they? Let me see here. Oh, okay. So here's a handy talkie antenna. Where's the 6 feet in there?
Probably in
Elmer?
A coil.
In a what?
In a coil.
So how does that work?
Very carefully.
They take all that antenna and they do this to it?
They wrap it around.
Like this?
Yep, it's probably wrapped in a coil.
It's no wonder the antenna doesn't work very well. You'd be better if you just tear the thing apart and pull the antenna out.
Yeah, well, that remains
not a good antenna.
That always remains to be seen.
I just know these little teeny plastic antennas, they don't cut it.
It's like that I've said before on this show. Antennas, no antenna in the world is perfect. There is no such thing. In fact, if you looked in the dictionary for the definition of a great antenna, it would tell you to see compromise.
Everything is a compromise.
Yep, and that's.
You're also the person that says that you should spend $2 on the antenna for every dollar you spend on your radio.
Exactly.
Well, this thing, according to the people that sell it, to all the people that are buying it, they say that the pros of this fine Baofeng is that they have good range. I'm not saying a word. They're inexpensive. Now, that is true. They're the cheapest radio you can buy. There's no question about it. They have great battery life, and they do have good battery life. I will say that for them. And it says they're the universal transceiver. Well, they certainly are that, because you can transmit on bands that will get you thrown in jail with this particular radio. Go ahead. Go on up to Cleveland and transmit on the aircraft bands and see what happens. I will not be making your bail. Cons, they say it could be a bit confusing at first. I don't know where the Baofengs stand any longer as far as their technical merits or lack thereof. The first ones that came out were not very technically good. They were very poor radios, to be frank with you, and they tended to be sloppy. You know, you would transmit on one frequency, but you were actually transmitting on 5 or 6.
Now I know somebody that actually took and put one of these through a spectrum analyzer.
How did that go?
For quite some time. And it was very dirty on transmit. And
was it?
It was, you could tell it was a $35 radio.
How selective can you be? You remember all that filtering you were talking about on that nice Kenwood?
Yep. I'll bet it's not in
it
this
doesn't
one.
exist here. All right, let's do one more. Then we'll come back to these after our video, because Pat and I both have better ideas as far as what your first radio should be. And by the way, this is what Santa's going to bring you this year, so you need to think about this all in advance. Here's number 3. This is a radio that I own. This is and by the way, it was not my first radio. I would have never had an HT as my first radio. You have so many limitations with an HT. They're great for what they do, but for your first radio, nah. But this is a Yaesu Ft60r, and this is a good radio. This radio is light, it's compact, it's programmable, it does both UHF and VHF, and it has a frequency lock. And that's something that the Baofeng does not have. The Kenwood would have that. But it's a great radio. The thing that I like about this particular radio, and this is personal experience, is it's very powerful. It has good range. And in addition to that, the battery lasts a long time, even if you are transmitting. I've had great battery life with mine, and the audio is crystal clear. That's one thing that nobody, including Icom, can take away from Yaesu. Yaesu has to have the most crystal clear audio of any group of radios that I have ever owned in my life. And my first radio was a Yaesu. I still have it. It's a FT2980R, that my Elmer, Pat Morrow, suggested that I purchase. And he said, it's powerful. He said, the audio is clear. He said, you'll love that radio. He said, it's very durable. It'll last forever, Gerry. And all those things that Pat told me were true.
Pat's a hell of a guy.
Pat is a hell of a guy, and he was smart about the 2980R. And I'm telling you, if you're going to get an HT, because you need one for whatever reason, you want to take it with you, throw it in the car when you go away on the weekends or whatever, you can't go wrong with this radio. It's the FT60, and you'll like it. It's a good radio. It really has, for cons, it says that the con of this radio is it's not waterproof. Really, I don't know of too many radios that are truly waterproof. I know that there are some that say they are, and it seems like they pretty much live up to their hype in the beginning, but it seems like the more you use that radio and the more you fiddle with the knobs or you press the buttons, it seems like the less waterproof it becomes.
That's why they call them bricks, because they sink when you throw them in the water.
Brick. Yeah, well, the iPhone, the iWatch was waterproof too when I first got it. And I notice it isn't anymore, so it is what it is. Number 4 on the list, we'll come back and we'll get here in a few minutes now. It's an Icom, so you won't get one of these checks, but nevertheless, it's from that company. But we will talk about that in a few minutes. When you're starting out, and of course I had made that vow that I would never pay $1,000 for a radio. If you're going to get a good HT, you're going to be close to $1,000 or over $1,000. Now, the radio that my wife got me so graciously for Father's Day, which is the IC7100, it's the Icom, it was not $1,000. It was more like $600. It was like $800, but it was on sale. That's the other thing. Shop around. When you're going to go out and look for where Santa should buy your radio at, look at a couple places. Don't just look at one. The day that I was looking, the day before Father's Day, it just so happened that this place in Akron had a sale going on these 7100s. They gave you $100 off on the radio, plus they sent this card for $100. So I got $200 off of that radio, which was an excellent deal. And of course, free 99. I mean, how can you do any better than that?
You can't do much better than that.
I love my wife. I love my wife. I've been practicing saying that ever since she got me that radio. But you're going to have about $1,000 in a good rig if you're going to have HF. And by HF, I'm not talking about just getting a 2-meter rig to start out. I'm talking about high frequency, your 40 meters, 80 meters, 20 meters, any kind of distance talking that you're going to do. When you get your general, you're going to want an HF radio. And there are 2 that are clearly the best. And that's what this video is all about.
We'll be back on the other side. You're listening to The World According to Elmer on Crooked River.
And
so
that's
a common
the Elmer
question
right
that I
there.
get asked all the time is, what radio should I buy? And usually it involves these 2 radios behind me, the Yaesu Ft991A or the Icom IC7300. Both are fairly similar radios, and people are just not sure which radio they should purchase. I have owned both of these radios before, and I can tell you that I do like both of them, but there are some differences and there are also some similarities to both of them. So I'm going to cover those in this video and help you to decide which radio you should purchase. So many of you who have watched my channel know that I have owned a Yaesu Ft991, and I sold it a little while ago, a little over a year and a half ago, I think now, and I purchased an IC7300 in its place. And the reason I did that was because I purchased a IC9700, the Icom 2 meter, 70 centimeter, and 23 centimeter base station radio. And I liked that radio so much that I decided to buy the IC7300, which is basically almost the same radio, just with HF and 6 meters. So that was the reason why I sold my FT991. Okay, so what are some similarities between the two radios? Well, I've jotted a few things down here. They're both great rigs. I liked my FT991 when I owned it, and I also like the IC7300. They're great radios. They both have USB sound cards for digital operation, so they're just one cable that you just plug straight into the PC, and you're good to go for the digital modes like FT8 and the other ones using WSJTX. They both have touch screens. They have all the filtering is included in the radio, so you don't need to buy any add-on filters. They both have a real-time spectrum scope and multicolor waterfalls. There is a note, though, that the FT991, so not the A version, but FT991, that does not have a scrolling real-time waterfall. The FT991A does, so that's the later model and the current model on the market that you can buy brand new, and that does have a scrolling waterfall. If you purchase just the 991, you have to press a button to refresh, and that refreshes the waterfall in a single display, or a single refresh, I suppose you could say. So it's not continual. Whereas the IC7300, I believe, has a superior waterfall, and that is in real time, and you can adjust all sorts of things on that waterfall, and I really do like it. Both radios have internal tuners that only operate on HF and 6 meters in the case of the FT991. They can tune antennas around 3-to-1 SWR or less, so they won't tune just random wires or 10-to-1 SWR, but 3-to-1 SWR or less is what they will tune. They both weigh around 9.5 pounds, or about 4.3 kilos each, and they're very, very similar in size. And they both have voice keys for contesting. So there's some of the key features that I have used. There's obviously many other similarities as well, but they're the main features that are all similar on both radios. Okay, let's move on to some key differences now, and we're going to talk about the FT991A first. So the FT991A is basically a shack-in-the-box radio. You can see here that's HF, VHF, and UHF all-mode transceiver, so it will do HF to 70 centimeters. You can also, if we scroll down here to the specifications on the 991A, you can see the TX frequency range, 1.8 to 54 megahertz, 144 to 148 megahertz, and 430 to 450 amateur bands only. Now, you've got a receive frequency range here in the HF spectrum of 0.03 to 56 megahertz. However, because the FT991A also does VHF and UHF, it means that you get to receive from 118 megahertz to 164 megahertz, and also UHF 420 to 470 megahertz. So that's something which is unique with the FT991A that you don't get with the IC7300. You don't get the high VHF UHF receiving. The FT991A also does 100 watts on HF and 6 meters, and it will do 5 to 100 watts, and 5 to 50 watts on 2 meters and 70 centimeters. The FT991A comes with C4 FM, which is Yaesu's digital mode. I've never used C4 FM before, so I don't know an awful lot about it, but it does come with that digital mode included in the radio. So another thing to note if you're buying the Yaesu FT991A is that if you are using this for portable, or you're using this off a battery, the radio will draw on receive with no signal 1.8 amps. With a signal present, it's around 2.2 amps. Now, transmit, it draws about 23 amps if you're running 100 watts and 15 amps at 50 watts. So that's quite a high current draw that you're going to be drawing all the time if you're not receiving any signal. So you may find that you're going to drain your battery quite quickly if you are running this portable, so that might be something to think about. So before we continue, do you own a Yaesu FT991 or a Icom IC7300, or do you own both? Please let me know in the comments below and what you think of those radios. Okay, so let's move on to the Icom IC7300 and some of the key differences between that and the FT991A. Now, as I mentioned before, the Icom IC7300 is a HF and 6 meter only radio, so that means that there's no receive above 74 megahertz. If we scroll down here, and we can see that here in the receive specifications. that it does not receive above 74.8 megahertz. So that's something to consider if you want some of that extra receive capabilities of the FT991A. So you get things such as airband, high band VHF, and also some UHF functionality with the FT991A. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. Now, the IC7300 also runs 100 watts, 2 to 100 watts on SSB, CW, FM, and RTTY, very similar to what the FT991A runs on HF. There's no D-Star, and there's no inbuilt digital mode in the IC7300, so the D-Star functionality is only in the Icom IC705 and the Icom IC9700 for running D-Star on the VHF and UHF bands, but because this is HF and 6 meters only, you don't get the D-Star functionality or Icom's D-Star functionality. One thing to note is that you do here have 0.9 amp typical standby current and 1.25 amp maximum audio current draw. So that's half of what the FT991A is. So if you are running portable and you want to use this off a battery, the 7300, then your battery's going to be much, much better because of the current draw is a lot lower, and it draws 21 amps on transmit as well. So even that's lower. You're not transmitting as much as you're receiving, so just something to keep in mind if you want to use it for that purpose. The other function that I've also got written down for the Icom IC7300 is that you do get an SD card slot, which you can use for recording your transmit and receive audio. I've used that before for monitoring and also for recording any DX that I might work as well. You can also use this for storing the voice care. I mentioned that both radios have voice cares, but the 7300's audio gets stored on the SD card for the voice care. There's plenty of other functions on the 7300 that set it apart from the 991, but I recommend that you go and check out the brochures for both of the radios below in the description, and I've only just briefly covered some of the basic functionality and the differences that I thought when I was purchasing the 7300 over the FT991. So in conclusion, what radio do I recommend, the IC7300 or the FT991A? Well, it all depends on exactly what your requirements are. If you're not worried about VHF or UHF and you only want to operate on HF and 6 meters, then I would definitely recommend the IC7300 over the 991A. You don't get the C4 FM and you won't get the extended receive, but the IC7300 you do gain the better waterfall. You also gain updatable firmware from Icom, which comes out very periodically. They release new firmware all the time, and I just think that it's a great radio. And if you end up down the track wanting VHF and UHF, it is expensive, but you can get an IC9700, an Icom IC9700 radio, and that radio is fantastic base radio for 2 meters 70 centimeters if you really want to get serious on VHF and UHF. But if you want a shack in the box and you just want one radio to do everything, then I fully recommend the FT991A. That radio, when I owned it, was fantastic. I think I had one issue with it, which was dealt with warranty, and that was related to the USB sound USB driver playing up. So I just sent it back to Yaesu, and they just fixed it for me. But apart from that, the radio didn't miss a beat. I had no problems with it at all. And so it all depends on exactly what you're going to use it for. So I hope that this video helped you in making the decision on which radio you should purchase, the Icom or the Yaesu. If you'd like to see more videos on the IC7300, then I have a link up here to a playlist where you can view all of them, and also the FT991A here below. So please check those out. 73, and thank you for watching.
That's a good video, and he boils it all down to whether or not you want your VHF and UHF bundled in your HF radio. I'm not a fan.
Well.
I'm not a fan.
You know I was going to make it. You know I was going. What I'm going to say. I can pretty much. You pretty much even know how I'm going to say it.
Pretty much, yeah. Well, I've got an Elmer, and I listen to what he says. So
I'm going to tell you the truth.
You have the 7300.
I have a 7300. I had a Yaesu 1200 DX, which was
That's a nice radio.
And the 1200DX was nice, but it had certain issues. It didn't have this. It didn't have the waterfall, which if you buy a radio, if you're going to pay that much money, you need a waterfall on it. And you need one.
A washing machine hooked up to it.
You need one that doesn't. You don't have to keep hitting the button on every 5 or 10 seconds in order to see what's on the band. That was the biggest problem I had with that 1200.
Is that right?
Yeah, that waterfall on that thing stunk. That was all there was to it.
You had to get refresh. Well, waterfall on my tube radios are my ears.
Well, you expect that. The other thing that he was talking about, if you want a shack in a box, well, if you like your TV, your stereo, and your videotape and everything else combined into one thing, go buy that radio, because that's what it is. That's a combination.
I don't like that,
a combination
because if you
radio.
Lose one radio, you lose the entire kit.
If your 2-meter radio goes down, your HF radio is going to be right down there with it. I have always been against these combo radios like that. I like the look of the 9100. I'd probably own one, but I'd own other radios with it. But the whole thing comes down. It comes down to the fact. You talk about your stereos
and your stuff. I remember back in the 1970s when all these audio companies, they started putting a turntable and they started putting a cassette deck and all went in with your AM FM radio. The problem was when they did that, all of the components began to stink to high heaven. They were not good at any one thing.
Exactly. I remember even my dad had an old Zenith that had a reel-to-reel in it, and it was a beautiful thing, but you have trouble with the amplifier, you're done. And
there goes your reel-to-reel. There goes your tape deck. There goes your phonograph.
There goes your FM listening. And that's the thing with the even combo radios now, like he was talking about there. I got not a thing against that 991A. It's a beautiful rig, but I wouldn't own it as the principal rig here, just because of the fact I don't want them combined.
You lose one radio, you lose everything in one fell swoop.
Exactly. And who wants to do that?
No, not me. Because
I like to talk too much.
If I have to send the HF rig back, at least I want something to play on in the meantime.
Exactly. And I use 2 meters.
The net's heavy till my HF rig comes back.
I use 2 meters as much as I use HF. It's about a 50-50 split.
Well, you're a club president too, so that kind of factors into that.
2 or 3 nights a week I'm on the repeater. A couple of nights a week I'm playing with FT8. That's been my
Well, if you had that Baofeng, you would... I'm not going there. Speaking of Baofengs, let's go back to our list since we're almost out of time here. We are on an Icom, by the way. The next radio that Santa's going to bring you is an actual mobile radio, so we need to move ahead. It is, there's Santa again. In fact, Santa likes tube radio. If you ever wondered whether or not Santa likes tube, now you know he does. This, my friends, is the Icom 2300H ham radio. It has 207 channels. It is one of the most popular 2-meter rigs, and that's what it is, and that's what it does, and it does it very well. And so it's one of the best-selling radios year in and year out.
By channels, you need to explain. It's got 207 memories.
Exactly. In other words, and I don't know anybody, it's a marketing deal, okay? But when you start talking about, well, it's got 100 channels or it's got 500 channels, it's like my 2980R here, my Yaesu, the 2-meter. I think it's got like 500 and some odd channels. Now, I have about 20 repeaters that I visit. So if they advertised, we've got 20 channels, that would be enough for me. But there are apparently some people that like all those different presets to where they can, go to each band and they can just sit there and go through without having to tune the radio. That's what that's all about. And I can see an advantage to that if you had it in a car. But like my first 2-meter rig that I used, you told me, Gerry, don't get a handy-talkie. You told me, go get a mobile radio, get a power supply and an external antenna, and set it up as a base, which is what I did.
Which is what most people do.
Yeah, and it works real well. And so you don't really need the presets when you have an opportunity to tune. But if you were driving down the road in the car, to be able just to reach over and press that first button, I can see an advantage to that.
Well, a lot of the reasons that most people use these rigs for base stations is they're only if I just got my license, I just put up a base antenna. I've got a Diamond X780. I just put it up. I want to take and be able to use 2 meters and 440. Okay, let's put this up and put it on the air. Well, that's all well and good. You could do that with an HT. You wouldn't get quite as far, but you could still do it because remember, antenna is the key to key to distance. You know, you're going to get a lot further on a good antenna than you would a bad one and a great radio.
Well, keep in mind, most of the people that are using the 2 meters are using it FM, and so yeah, height is might. I mean, height is it on FM. FM is line of sight transmission, and so you can get a tram or a diamond antenna, stick it up on your roof, and you can use your HT with that, and you can get tremendous range. But
it comes in when the nice part about these mobile rigs is they've got a cord on them. You can put them on a desk. You can take you can set them, take the radio and put the mic on your desk. You can actually if you wanted to, you could actually put a desk mic on them. For the most part, you got to figure out how to wire it.
It's been my experience that by the time you buy the handheld mic and you buy the external antenna and you buy the thingamabobber that you have to have to hook your external antenna up to your handy-talkie, which is a device that looks just like this. In fact, this is one. This screws right on the top of the handy-talkie, and then your 239 screws right into it. By the time you buy all this stuff, plus your power supply, you have as much or more in your handy-talkie as you would if you had just gone out and got a mobile.
Exactly.
And you got a better radio with the mobile, and you got more power. This next one, this is number 5. We'll skip ahead. Oh, and the only thing they say that's bad about the Icom is they said the user manual is hard to read. So, whatever. It's hard to read on all of them.
When it's made by J.A. Penn, you know it's good.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Better than the Chinglish that the other ones are written in. Oh, it's Santa Claus. Look how many tube rigs Santa is hoarding. Shame on him.
Yeah, they're all rejects.
I do not recommend this next radio, even though it is the number 5 seller. So a lot of people are being duped into buying this radio. But this one is a B-Tech Mini. And I mean, when I say mini, I mean mini. It's like about the size of a cigarette pack. And maybe a little bigger than that. But it's the 25-watt ham radio, and it's on 4 different bands. Now, the only reason that I even looked at one of these things is because it has the 220 meters, the 220 megahertz, the 1.25 meters in the radio. And I really wanted that at the time. And I wound up getting a TYT instead that had that in it. But this radio, according to my friends that have, I have had 4 friends that have bought this radio. And all 4 of them have sent it back and gotten their money back.
Yeah, I've heard that about that radio.
It bricks out really fast. So there you go on that one. And number 6 here is the Yaesu. We've got a Yaesu coming up. Oh, it's Santa again, and Santa apparently is listening with his cans. He's got his cans on, and he's doing HF, I can tell.
Looks like a set of Hiles.
I think that's what he's saying. Anyway, this next one is the Yaesu Ft857D, which is a tri-band radio. And there you go. And it is a better quality radio than the B-Tech. Even though the B-Tech outsells it, go figure. What they should do is they should do another list of these, and they should have the number of sales versus the number of returns.
I think they discontinued the 857, didn't they?
What's this now?
I think they discontinued the 857, didn't they?
They could have, because this is 2020, so which is the latest year for the sales statistics.
I think that the 5100 is what they're pushing now. That's similar to what this is.
The one that I just bought for my car, I just bought a Yaesu to throw in my car, and I bought a 3100R, and it's a real good 2-meter radio. Clear audio, very powerful, 50 watts.
Yeah.
Not quite as much wattage as the 2980, but they've raised the 2980 in price. It was $150 when I bought it, and the 2980 has gone to $200. So I got the 3100 for about $140 at that place up in Talmadge. And this next one, I don't even know what to say about this. This is number 7, and this is literally the brand name on this is TWAY, T-Way RDIO. So it's all one word. TWAY RDIO. Toy Radio, I guess, is a brand. I don't know, but it's a Chinese 25 watt is what it is. And so, if you're interested in that kind of thing and you want to pay just a few bucks for a radio, there you go. But be aware that when you buy a radio that has no brand name and they're going to throw the antenna in with it, chances are you're buying junk.
You get like what you pay for.
Advertise, guitar packages for your kid, where they give you a cheap amplifier and a cheap guitar and the cord to plug it in with, and there you go. Except then you learn later that your kid can't go anywhere with it because it's a piece of garbage. And so you should have just gone out to the local music store and bought a real guitar to begin with. This is kind of what you get when you buy radios like this. I would say buyer beware on stuff like that, because it may seem like a great deal, and it may get you on the air for just a little while, but sooner or later, I think you're going to find yourself disappointed if you get something that doesn't at least have some kind of a track record, because there's a million radios out there right now that have no name. And usually what you just said is true. You get exactly what you pay for. There's no free lunch, and you're not going to get a diamond when you're looking in a stack of coal. That's all I can tell you. So that's what you're going to get with this kind of a radio. But if that's your thing, go for it. It's the number 7 selling radio in 2020 in the United States of America. So there you go. Had you ever heard of it?
No.
I didn't think so.
There's a place called Buy Two-Way Radios that has a bunch of these off-brand things. I don't know if this is on there or not. I haven't been on that site in about a year. But that's where I bought the PNYs that I bought in the past.
Here's the thing. There's a lot of ignorance when it comes to buying your first radio, because the people buying a first radio don't have a lot of experience, and if they've been licensed, they haven't been licensed long. This is one of the reasons that we tell you continually on this program that you need to join your local club. And your local club is not Facebook. It's not MeWe. It's not any of the social media sites. Your local club is your local club. And if you get into a local club with a bunch of guys and gals that think like you do, that like radio as a hobby, you're going to talk to these guys and gals, and you're going to find out what they've bought and what they've used and what has been good for them and what has not worked for them. And so you're going to have somebody to kind of lead you along in the beginning to where you don't get trapped into buying a piece of junk. And that's what I did with Pat when I was buying radios in the beginning. When I knew nothing, I wasn't afraid to say, hey, what do you think? How would you start? What would you do if you were me? And nothing wrong with asking those questions. And I don't know of anybody that's ever said, I don't have time for you. I have never
Unless you're on
anyone.
Facebook.
Well, yeah, you'll hear that exactly.
I've seen that time and time again on Facebook, and those operators ought to be strung up.
But you're not going to hear that at your local club. The guy sitting next to you is not going to look at you and say, I don't have time to help you. He's going to give you some ideas.
Most of your local clubs are like mine. They have when you walk into my club and you look around and you see guys and you think, man, that guy's a stuffed shirt. And Man, I don't think I'd ever be able to talk to that guy. And then you're in a meeting or two with them, and all of a sudden you speak up, and they turn around and they say, that was a good point. These are these guys that you're saying, what? I don't think I'd ever be able to talk to him. He's too smart for me, or he looks like a lawyer. And these are the same guys that are turning around, and it turns out that they're the nicest people you'd ever want to meet.
We all started at the same spot. Nobody's any better than anybody else in your local club.
And in order, if you get a chance just to go visit a club, go do it. If you're there 5 minutes and somebody walks up to you and says, my name's Pat, my call sign's N80QP, who are you? And you tell them your call sign, that's the club to join. Because that's a friendly club, and you're going to be able to talk to everybody there. Without a doubt.
Exactly right. It's all good. Well, I hope you got some ideas on what Santa needs to bring you this year for Christmas. Next week on the show, I have every reason to believe that we have a guy that's going to join us from a country in Europe. I'm not going to give it away. I'm going to keep it a secret. But he's a CW guy, and he's a ham radio guy. And he's going to come in and talk about radio in his country versus our country, some of the things that are the same, some of the things that are different. So it should be a good show.
Yeah, it ought to be. Of course, it always is.
It's always a good show.
We do it.
And it's always good to be with you, Pat.
Pat
is our owner.
It's always good to be with you, Jerry.
Well, thank you. Pat is N80QP. I'm Gerry Sorenson, Kilo Golf 8, Radio Yankee. Have a great week on the bands, and Pat and I will be back next Tuesday night, and we'll head across the big pond and see what radio's like over there.
73, everyone.
73.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation of the Crooked River Radio Network. See you again soon.